So a lot of churches and Christians and pastors portray God as this big, angry, judgmental, punishing man in the sky.
You call Jerry a dum-dum? Don't you dare insult my Jerry! Cop!
Thanks for smiting me!
Who's going to light you on fire forever if you don't do what he says. And not only do I disagree with that interpretation, but I think it lacks context.
But it's also about what is the culture of the environment.
See, if you want to understand God in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, you need to ask yourself a question of context. There's this great bit that Chris Rock did back in the 90s about this exact phenomenon.
You don't need pork. Some people don't eat pork for religious reasons, which I think is dumb. See, people don't realize, like, religious books were written by man. You know, like 5,000 years ago, before there was Reynolds Wrap, before there was refrigerators, before there was freezers, before there was seasoning, a pork chop might kill you.
The when, why, and to whom the text was written really influences how you understand it, and that's what we're talking about this week. Hello all, I'm the Mad Pastor, and Christianity sucks. It's boring, it's out of date, it's irrelevant, but it doesn't have to be. Let me explain why. So we are continuing our look at the 10 Commandments, and this is the second one, kind of depending on your perspective on things, because not every church, not every denomination agrees on how we're supposed to split these up, because it's not like in the original Bible they had numbers that said, Commandment 1, this, Commandment 2. So the first two ones especially kind of overlap, and people interpret them differently. I'm going to use the traditional United Methodist perspective and say that the second commandment is about making idols, and that's what we're going to read now. I am reading from the book of Exodus chapter 20 verses 4 through 6. They sound like this. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. Before we continue, I want to remind you that we, for the foreseeable future, are collecting funds for a group called Zoe Empowers. They quite literally empower communities with skills and entrepreneurial education to make their own businesses and make an economy and a living in their own community. We've been assigned a community in Rwanda, and every dollar you give to this channel goes directly to helping those people. So please use the QR code over here or any of the links down below, or you can mail a check P.O. Box down below to Kindred UMC, and all of that will go to help the people in Rwanda that we are getting to know as we speak. So let's continue. So let's get the hard stuff out of the way first, this jealous God language and the punishing to the third and fourth generation. Let's deal with that. So the thing you have to understand, this is what I was saying about context at the beginning. The thing you have to understand is that the Israelite people are surrounded by pagan culture. So one, they're used to other gods, and they're used to other gods being jealous and petty and not really having people's best interests at heart. And so this is how we get the sacrifice system, because people start to go like, okay, how do I make gods happy? How do I make the God of the rain happy? Maybe I sacrifice some of my crops, and then maybe you have a bad season because of random weather events, and they attribute it to the gods being angry. And so like you start increasing your sacrifice to try and make them happier, and then eventually you get to sacrificing animals, and then eventually you get to starving your family and sacrificing your kids, because not only will that maybe please the gods, but also there's one less mouth to feed. And you can see how this spirals out of control if that's the mentality you have. So the starting place for most people in the time that this was written would be some kind of pagan understanding of angry and petty gods. So when God says, I'm a jealous God, what he's saying is don't worship those ones. Don't do it that way. Because instilled in the Hebraic law, the Hebrew law of the Israelites, is a standard form, you know if God is happy or not, and a theology that says when it doesn't rain and you have a drought season, that's not because God's mad at you. It's because of random events, and God is always with you. So the jealous God language is about that. It's trying to get people to stay away from the temptation to roll down this sacrificial hill and get to ultimately what ends up being human and child sacrifice. A jealous God protects against that idea. The other challenging thing here is the punishing to the third and fourth generation children for the sins of their parents. Like, that's rough stuff. But again, you have to understand that's kind of the starting place. That's the understanding that everyone would have had about gods. And you can't read the Bible literally. You can't do it because it doesn't make any sense, because the next thing that God says is, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation. So like what? If a parent is bad and so God's going to punish 3 or 4 generations, but like let's say the next generation is good, well now how are you going to punish 2 more generations and show steadfast love to the 1,000th generation? Like, if you think that these people were reading this literally, you're kidding yourself. You're not paying attention. They understood that this was a turn of phrase. This was kind of like not a metaphor or analogy exactly, but they didn't think that it was literally, oh, like if I screw up, my kids and my kids' kids and my kids' kids' kids are doomed. They thought of it as no, this is a statement about God punishes to the 3rd generation, but forgives to the 1,000th generation. This is a statement about, no, this is a God of grace. This is a God who has your best interests at heart. This is a God who actually loves and wants to show love abundantly and steadfastly. Steadfast, a love you can count on even through the droughts. The other interesting thing here is the numbers involved. 1,000 was not just like 1,000, literally 1,000. It was in an ancient time, and a people who didn't have a need to count that high very often, that number meant like higher than you could ever imagine counting. It's not just 1,000, it's almost like infinite. It's almost like uncountable. We see this in I don't know if you have ever come across the 144,000 in the end times language. Yeah, it's 12 times 12 times 1,000. So it's like all the 12, which is like a full complete number. It has the meaning of everyone, and 1,000 to the infinite. So like the 144,000 is not a literal thing if you've ever encountered that, and you can tell people I said so. No, it's a numerology thing. So when God says, I'm forgiving to the 1,000th generation, it might as well be saying, I am infinitely forgiving, steadfast in love forever. So this is a statement more about God's grace than it is about the big punishing, condemning man in the sky who will light you on fire if you don't do what he says. All right, now let's get to the idol part, because if you're watching this in 2024 or later, then you might be wondering what's the deal with idols? How does this rule even apply? Aren't idols people anyway? Because we literally have a show in the United States called American Idol that's about people becoming stars and entertainers. If you're into K-pop at all, they literally call the members of the band idols. So people who entertain is not what they're talking about here. I was also talking with another one of my congregants who said that they were taught role models were idols, and no, that's not what they're talking about here either. So it begs the question, what in the world is an idol, and how does that rule even apply now? So again, we have to talk about cultural context, the setting that this was written in and for. Idols were little figurines that people would carve, or maybe big statues, or maybe kind of like medium statues that would be in your home, where they would represent the god that your family or your tribe was loyal to. So they would kind of be avatars. They would be like stand-ins for the god. Or sometimes people would literally worship nature. So they would look off into the distance and maybe see a mountain and go like, that must be what a god is. Or if they ran into an elephant. If you've never seen an elephant and you see an elephant for the first time, you're going to be like, what is this? This is otherworldly. There's that popular psalm, Psalm 121, I lift my eyes to the hills, but where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the creator of heaven and earth. If pagans are worshiping mountains, this psalmist is saying, you worship the mountain, I worship the God who made the mountain. So sometimes and often in this culture, they would worship nature or they would worship literally the figurine. And Yahweh says kind of twofold, don't make idols of me and don't make idols of anything else and don't worship them. So what Yahweh is really saying in this commandment is don't make an idol of me and don't worship any other idols. Now, how does that even remotely apply to us today? Most people, again, as I said in the last video, most people don't even understand that there could be multiple gods. Most people think there's either no God or there's one God. So what is this other God stuff and what does it matter to us today? Well, let's think of it this way. Here is a poster of Star Wars. Now, if you have never seen Star Wars and all you have is this poster, and I asked you to tell me what Star Wars is about, tell me the plot, tell me the characters, describe everything. If you've never seen it, you probably can't do that. In order to do that in some reliable way, you would have to go see the actual movie. There's something about the dialogue and the characters actually doing things in motion and in real time that kind of gives you a much deeper, better understanding of what Star Wars is. This is the essence of the idols. Don't make an idol of God because it's static, it's still, it's unmoving, it's contained in a moment of time. And God, Yahweh, the Israelite God, is a dynamic, moving, active God. So now let's combine these kind of interpretations to see what the real statement that applies to us today might be. Don't put limits on me. I am a dynamic, moving God. Do not make an idol of me and do not make an idol of anything else. So don't put static limits on me. Why? Because my grace is abounding infinitely. If you put limits on me, it will go bad for you. If you don't put limits on me, you will experience my infinite, abounding, steadfast love that goes to the infinite generations. So, I've been the Mad Pastor. This is the Second Commandment. I hope you learned something about how to read the Bible. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.